Hello, can you hear me? Yes. Okay, thank you. Hello and welcome, dear participants, to our session today entitled The Green Decade Transformational Change for the Regeneration of Watersheds and Proper Use of Wastewater. You are enjoying a course offered thanks to the support of GEF CReW Plus project, whose purpose is to provide knowledge and space for the co-creation of water and sanitation solutions in the wider Caribbean region. The GEF CReW Plus is a collaborative project funded by the Global Environment Facility, co-implemented by the Inter-American Development Bank and the United Nations Environment Program in 18 countries in the wider Caribbean region. GEF CReW Plus is being executed on behalf of the Environment International Development Bank by the German Agency for International Cooperation and the Organization of American States, on behalf of the United Nations Environment Program by the Secretariat of Cartagena Convention. The GEF CReW Plus project offers innovative nature-based solutions to mitigate the effects of untreated wastewater um, on the environment and public health. The Central American Institute is a public administration is an institute that specializes in the education and training of human resources at the local, national, and regional level. So it's a pleasure for us to be the institution in charge of the facilitating this learning space. The institution was created in 1954 with the United Nations with the support of the Economic Commission for Latin America and the Caribbean within the General Secretariat of the Central American Integration System. My name is Maria Paula Rojas and I'm the project assistant. I will be the person who will accompany the teacher this morning. Before we begin, this session will be recorded and uploaded to the ICAP Virtual Campus website. If you do not wish to be recorded, I kindly request you to indicate this via the meeting chat. The training provided in the framework of this academic program will be divided into modules. This session belongs to Module 2, in which we'll address elements of regenerative development, integrated watershed management, and the importance of proper wastewater management in the climate change environment. In addition, we remind you that upon active participation during the synchronous session and the completion of the evaluation activities hosted in the ICAP virtual campus, you can opt for a certificate of achievement issued by ICAP with regional recognition. Now I will introduce the facilitator of the module, Don Miguel Araujo Padilla. Miguel Araujo Padilla is executive president of Salva Natura. He has worked as a director of the Basel Convention Regional Center for Central America and Mexico, and also served as the director of the Secretariat for Environmental Affairs of the Free Trade Agreement between the United States and Central America and the Dominican Republic, as well as Deputy Director General of the International Union for Conservation of Nature, and holds a master's degree in economics and science and in public administration from the State University of New York. Now I will give the floor to Miguel to begin the module 1. Miguel?
Thank you very much, Maria Paula. It's an honor to be with you today, distinguished colleagues from the Caribbean. I also participated for some months in the GEF Small Island Program, in the formulation of the small island programs for development with low or zero chemicals. So it's an honor to be with you. I will start right away with the presentation, and I hope that is of interest to you. I welcome very much your comments, suggestions at the end of my presentation. Let me share the screen with you at the moment. Okay, I am sharing the screen already, and I'm ready to roll. The presentation of today is part of this academy, which I'm really thrilled to be part of. And the theme is the Green Decade, transformative change towards the regeneration of watersheds and the correct use of wastewaters. We have three items. First of all, explaining what the red code triple emergency is, that is affecting the planet, and then detailing what is the proposal of the Green Decade to see if it is of interest for the Caribbean countries to be part of it, and then also focusing on the importance of adequate wastewater management, and trying to end with some conclusions of actions that can be taken after this presentation. We'll talk about the red code, but first of all, some background information about global efforts to improve the quality of life in the world. The first wave was the setting up of the Millennium Development Goals, which were approved by the UN General Assembly in September 2000. It was the first attempt to look at not just one dimension, but different critical and important dimensions to improve the quality of life in the world. So these 8 areas were identified: the eradication of extreme poverty and hunger, to achieve universal primary education, to promote gender equality and empower women, to reduce child mortality, to improve maternal health, to combat HIV, AIDS, and malaria, as well as other diseases, to ensure environmental sustainability, and in order to be successful, to promote a global partnership so that all of these goals can be advanced and achieved by 2015. Then we have the jump. Many advances were achieved, but when this was reviewed by the General Assembly in 2015, already a process had already finished of preparation, which took about 2 years. And the world leaders were really happy about the Millennium Development Goals, but they became more ambitious. They saw that those 8 goals were very good, but we needed to add others in order to have a stable and prosperous world. So from 8, we jump almost into double, up all the way up to 17 goals, including the poverty, the hunger, but including the good health and well-being, quality of education, which is essential, gender equality, the clean water and sanitation was there included, the affordable and clean energy, the decent work and economic growth, new dimensions, the industry innovation and infrastructure, the reduction of inequalities, sustainable cities, because we were advancing quite rapidly, and we still are, towards urbanization within each of our countries. The responsible consumption and production, because this is the main core of the many affections towards the planet. Climate action, because climate was not included in the previous goals. Life below water, because in the Millennium Development Goals, everything seemed to be focused on land, but the planet is 70% water. But the life of land, of course, is always important. Peace, justice, and strong institutions. Again, the associations or partnerships for the goals as well were included. So how can we see the difference between the 8 Millennium Development Goals and the Sustainable Development Goals? where is a tree that is bigger, is more complex, but this is because many experts identify the connectivity of different topics and the need, in order to make a difference, to have a wider scope and to have a systemic approach where what happens in one of these areas not only affects the individual area, but affects many other of the areas. And the question may be for the future, where are we headed to after the SDGs, which are aimed to be complied with by 2030, which is very close by, only 8 years, 7 years from now. So in this chart, we can see the evolution from Sustainable Development Goals, from Millennium Development Goals, and Sustainable Development Goals. There is a little mistake in the chart. And we can see that some areas receive more importance. The three areas, persons, planet, and prosperity, were still there, but were strengthened. And especially the environment and the prosperity, because we don't want to keep the people poor all over the world or unhappy. The aim is to have a balanced well-being of the population of the world. So the prosperity is essential. Peace was included, and partnerships were still, in the previous Millennium Development Goals that are now in the Sustainable Development Goals. So the difference are, and this is from UNICEF, is a good compilation. Sustainability gives a big importance. It puts sustainability at the center on this issue, which has been in the background for the last 15 years. And this is a very important step because it realizes that we cannot continue in the path we are following. We need to change course. And this is a major conclusion. It's not very easy to be accepted and implemented, but this is reality. At this moment, the experts, the scientists, had advised the UN and in the discussions, and different stakeholders as well, that the past behavior of mankind in the planet was not sustainable. The equity as well is very important. And this is a major difference because the Millennium Development Goals were based on national averages. And this misses a lot of the challenges as well as potential opportunities. So the picture started to be more detailed with more pixels so that we could zero in more effectively on the different topics that are interrelated and that make a system of well-being as a change from a system of poverty and insatisfaction. Universality is very important. Why? Because before, the Millennium Development Goals were focused on developing countries. And now the scientists and the different sectors advise the UN that everybody needed to change, especially if the world was not sustainable. We needed to change not only in developing countries, but in developed countries as well. Then another difference is that the Millennium Development Goals were not mandatory, but the Sustainable Development Goals, we have here a commitment from all countries It was a voluntary commitment, but it was a commitment to report on each of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals that were agreed. And the scope is wider. It may seem to be ambitious, but all of these issues were thought to be fundamental, essential. For example, the decent employment or climate change was totally absent in the previous Millennium Development Goals. So let's start with some background about climate change and the human factor. And let's start with the human factor on Earth, especially because now we are in what is called the Anthropocene era in the planet. So we can see in these charts that the population started to grow very slow at the beginning, and it grew to 200 million up to the year 1 AD, even though some, the estimates, the quantity estimates are not very exact, are not perfect. Some estimate that probably this is downplayed, is a low estimate that we may have been 300 million, and some even mentioned 600 million. So this indicates how imprecise these estimates were. But the growth is estimated to have been of under 0.05% a year. This changes significantly with the Industrial Revolution. And there we have a big spike afterwards, because it had taken all of the human history around 1,800 years for the world population to reach 1 billion. And the second billion was achieved in only 130 years, in 1930. The third billion in 30 years. The 4 billion in 15 years, in 1974. And the fifth billion in only 13 years. Thank God, we are seeing now that the speed of the population growth is slowing. So we are not likely to double the population or to increase 1 billion in shorter period of times. But still, the projections are of a growing population in terms of numbers of inhabitants on planet Earth. And this is a challenge because the planet doesn't grow with the resources, with the natural capital. But on the contrary, we'll see that we have been abusing of the natural capital. So in 1970, there were roughly half as many people as in the world up to now. So it will take now, it's projected that it will take 200 years to double the population again. But thank God, because otherwise we would be in a much worse situation than today, even though our situation is very critical. And what is the main responsible is our addiction with oil. Oil was important, fossil fuel was important to make possible the Industrial Revolution. That's a positive angle. But the pollution that creates not only affects at the lower level of the atmosphere, but it goes all the way up to the greenhouse gases that we have in the planet normally, naturally, which are wonderful because it keeps the temperature on average before our fossil fuel impact at an average of 18 degrees centigrade, which is perfect. And before this natural occurring greenhouse layer, without it, we would have been probably at 40 degrees below centigrade, which is not a very kind average temperature for the planet. So on this issue, there have been several comments that maybe we didn't know about the impact of fossil fuels, and we're just waking up in recent years about it. Well, this slide shows you that this is not true. That as early as in 1911, we had in Popular Mechanics, a very popular magazine, this article that showcased the importance of coal to make possible the Industrial Revolution, but they realized that the climate was going to be warmer because of this, unless mankind found a way to capture these gases, the CO2 gases, in order to limit the warming beyond becoming a problem. So it's very important to realize this, because there has been so many efforts from the fossil fuel sector to mix the information, to put doubts, and to argue in favor of keeping the fossil fuel use. And here we can see the impact of this. This shows the CO2 emissions all the way down to 800,000 years. And you can tell me, come on, Mr. Araujo, how are you telling us this? We haven't lived there. Who measured this? Well, what happened is that scientists sent some capsules. They were able to go deep in the poles, in the ice, and were able to capture bubbles of air from this 800,000 years before, and they contain CO2 emissions. That's how this has been measured so long in the past. And we can see clearly that for millennia, the CO2 emissions have never gone up higher than this line, which is about 300 CO2 parts per million. And now we are totally outside the range. And a measurement that I checked when I prepared the material on April 14 was 420.48 parts per million. And you can see that we are almost on the elevator of this. And why is this a problem? And this is especially since 1950. It's a very short time period to have such a change of impact in the atmosphere, because CO2 doesn't remain here in the lower part of the atmosphere, but it goes all the way up, and it lasts for 1,000 years. Of course, this number does not only reflect CO2, but it reflects as well other greenhouse gases measured as CO2 equivalents. Okay, so many say that, many wise leaders have said, a picture is worth 1,000 words. And this is another chart, and I have here the link for you. This chart is updated daily. So you can monitor where we are. When you click this link below, it shows you the daily CO2 emissions. Okay? Clearly, we are going all the way up. And what is the problem of this increase? The problem is that, of course, if the greenhouse gases layer becomes wider, then the temperature, the heat that before was being released to space remains in the lower parts of the atmosphere. And heat is energy. Heat generates an increase in the temperature. The clouds have more water. Remember that our planet is 70% sea, and the sea is a darker color, with the exception of some Caribbean beaches, which they're light blue, beautiful. But generally, they're a darker color, and then this is being trapped by the sea. Thank God. But this has consequences. So more water on the clouds, more droughts as well, because it's hotter. So not only there is more evaporation from the ocean, but there is more evaporation of the humidity from the soil. And that's why we have both really high and intense rains and really high and intense droughts and longer. And what is happening in the poles is really worrisome. The North Pole has heat waves in full winter during 3 consecutive years, recent years, 2016, 17, and 18. And we'll see later what happened this year, only last month. And of course, this has consequences. We are seeing the Arctic ice, and this is a chart from 1,500 years ago. And we are seeing the decline of 50% of the Arctic ice sheet in only few years. And this is worrisome, because the ice is white. And what happens when we paint a house in white or light colors? The heat is being repelled. It doesn't stay in those buildings or houses. So when the ice sheets melt, then we go from white of the ice into darker sea ocean colors. So then the function of the poles, being the two freezers of the world, starts to break down. Okay, this is a major change in the operation of the planet, and it has consequences. And this is why scientists unanimously agree that the temperature may have increased already even higher than one centigrade degrees. Actually, is about 1.2 nowadays. But the expected increase in temperatures in the poles is projected to be 3 times that. And this is not only because of what I just mentioned, the reduction of the white ice cover, but also is explained by what I'm about to show you now. The change in the weight in the jet stream. This is before. So we had a very stable jet stream, And this jet stream kept the freezer close in the poles. But what is happening today, because of climate change, global warming, is that the jet stream has become more unstable. And the normal function of heat coming always from the tropics to the northern parts to make life more livable, now is being limited by the waving jet stream. And I'll show you one concrete example. This is from NASA, and you can see this is real-time data from previous months. And this is part, by the way, of the presentations made by the Climate Reality Project by Mr. Al Gore, where I am a leader as well. And I invite any of you that may have interest to participate in our trainings, which are free of charge. And some of them are physical, require physical presence, but some are virtual. So last year, we had a concrete worrisome happening, which was, you see the North Pole all the way up here, and then how the cold air went all the way down to where? To Texas. To Texas. And also, as we have opened the freezer, many of the blizzards are more frequent or last longer. That's why sometimes during the winter in Europe and the US, we almost every 2 weeks we see a winter storm. And this has an impact on the quality of life, on the economy, on nature. The weather is changing significantly, not only likely. And the cold air, the Arctic air, went all the way down to Texas. And even there was some confusion here because it was colder there in Texas than in San Francisco, or maybe in Alaska, because warm air had jumped all the way down up to Alaska. Amazing. And this is what happened with the Arctic air coming all the way down to Texas. So Texas was under a winter storm warning. Amazing. Also, I'm sorry, as temperatures rise, there is more evaporation, more moisture into the sky. And it's not just like that, but actually we have the shaping of something new, which is the occurrence of atmospheric rivers. Yes, rivers in the air, ready to fall on land or in the ocean, and causing catastrophes. And I'll share with you what happened last month. This is an atmospheric river that connects Hawaii with California. Okay, and this carries up to 2 times the quantity of water of the Amazon River. We are also seeing weird occurrences. Normally, the 2 poles move in different schedule. When it's winter in the northern pole, it's summer in the southern pole. But now we have this year a coincidence of the two poles being 50 degrees warmer than average. So this is 50 degrees Fahrenheit, 30 degrees Celsius, warmer than average. In some parts of the presentation, I will go fast, but I have done a lot of work to leave you with a good reference material for you to review it slowly afterwards. And I'm sure that you might be interested and that you can use this information for different uses. So this is what happened in March. An ice shelf in the Antarctica, the size of New York City, collapsed in, some say in 2 weeks, then others say in 2 days. And why? Because of an atmospheric river. And before the river arrived, the temperature in the southern pole went up to 40 degrees centigrade higher. And the worrisome is that the Glenser Conger ice shelf, which broke, was like stopping other pieces of ice to come to the ocean. And this is worrying many scientists around the world, because if the other ice parts follow the same path, this can translate into a really high increase on sea level rise. All the way up, if in the worst case, to 50 meters above current levels. Let's cross our fingers that this is not the future. And this is another news that highlighted the problem of this occurring. And this has many world scientists worried. Unfortunately, the media coverage was not very good. They gave more coverage to the slap in the face of in the Oscar ceremony than to this. So as a result of climate change, we have floods and extreme rainfall occurring 4 times more often than in 1980. In you colleagues from the Caribbean, you know very well that. You have suffered so many years the pain, the damage, and the loss because of this increased activity of hurricanes, and even more powerful, more frequent. And unfortunately, the forecast for the future is not good. And we will need to do a really big effort in order to avoid significant changes towards a positive outcome. This is reflected in the global record of precipitation anomalies. The IPCC report mentioned that this is occurring not only in one section, in one part of the world, but in all regions of the world. This is a video of what happened in Brazil this year. I know I could have many videos of what happened in the Caribbean, as well as in Central America, not in India and other parts, but this is recent. I wanted to show you.
Hi, Chav Weather here with a video looking at flash floods and landslides that hit the city of Metropolis in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, on February the 15th, 2022. Heavy rain caused flash flooding in the mountain city, with streets turning into waterfalls as torrents washed cars and buses downstream. The rain also caused heavy landslides which destroyed roads, buildings and vehicles. The instability of the ground has raised the fear of further landslides in the coming days. In total, 1 month's worth of rain fell in a 6-hour period, overwhelming the city's drainage systems. In lower-lying areas, floods filled houses and shops, washing away their contents. As the floodwaters subsided, large amounts of debris filled the streets, blocking roads and causing further danger to residents. Businesses and schools were forced to shut, with hundreds of citizens displaced from their homes. Emergency shelters have been set up to help those affected. A state of emergency has been declared by the city's mayor, with residents warned not to leave their homes. Authorities are currently assessing the damage caused. Thank you for watching, with special thanks to my Patreon members. Please comment, like and subscribe to the channel.
So clearly, we cannot have the same design in infrastructure than before, because environmental conditions have changed. We need to overestimate capacity now. Otherwise, we are about to have a worsening situation where many waters or rivers of water would be clogged, and in flooding and damage which will increase. So this is not an environmental issue, as you know very well, in the Caribbean. To be carried out globally. But we later will touch on the issues, what can be done in order to avoid this current situation from worsening to the point where mankind may not have any chance in the future to continue living in this planet.
And I'll be back.
And the type of infrastructure at risk from climate change related extreme weather is quite varied. And this includes, of course, water systems, drinking water systems, wastewater systems, as well as many other infrastructure, well, stormwater drainage, which is essential. But it affects so many sectors, like agriculture, tourism is not here included, but definitely, you know very well what I'm talking about, as tourism is so important in the Caribbean and as well in Central American countries. So this chart summarizes the two, the extreme droughts and the floodings. And the tendency, the slope is going higher and higher as time passes by. And we need to review what is the global water use. Because when we later see the slide that I will show you on the planetary boundaries, we'll see that sweet water is not a problem because the planet generates enough sweet water for the current population. But we are misusing the water that is available. And we're still doing irrigation by aspersion. We're still mistreating the soil, breaking the soil every year killing all the live organisms that help to make the soil more rich in nutrients. The industrial part is becoming also important in domestic use. And especially something that we need to realize is that the lack of proper maintenance for the water systems in cities, which is the reality in developing countries, translates quite often, and this happens in El Salvador, most of our countries, on a 50% water leakage. This may be good in terms of going to the aquifers, but it's not good because it reduces the quantity of water available for the population. And this is why, despite the significant water availability from our systems, we cannot make this availability able to reach to the population. And we have currently 40% water scarcity in the world. And some of it relates to the lack of harvesting rainwater and in continuing the practices from the old days and not using water efficiently. And how does climate change affect water availability? Well, we have this chart, which is very, very good, but it doesn't include the population growth. We need another blue element there to include the population growth. So the worrisome thing is that we have reduced supply because most of the water, because of the increased volume, it runs off all the way down to the ocean, or it leaks because of the leaks. We have droughts, so we have a reduction in the rainwater availability as an average per year. We have sea level rise, and this reduces the aquifers that are nearby the shoreline. We have the melting of the ice in the upper part of the mountains, and they have been reservoirs of water for the lower part of the watersheds. So if you add the population growth, we have a challenge. This clearly indicates that probably is as important as measuring the CO2 footprint to measure from now on the water footprint. Because this 40% water scarcity for the population, unfortunately, unless we change and take this reflection into action, is likely to increase. So people, here we have the people factor. But I don't like the picture of bottles, single-use plastic. And you know this very well, how it affects tourism in the Caribbean. And many countries have banned already single-use plastic. Plastic is not bad if it is multiple uses. But single-use is a problem because it doesn't biodegrade, but what happens is that we have photodegradation into small parts, all the way down to microplastics. And this is not only a visual bad thing for tourism, but it is a serious health risk to mankind and to all living beings in the ocean and in the rivers. Okay. So this animation shows what I was mentioning before, the same effect, and this is why we have more rain and more droughts at the same time. And what is the challenge? Well, we have COP26 last year. We have the IPCC report for the first time telling mankind that we still have one window, but it's a small window, and it requires a big, ambitious target to cut CO2 emissions from now until 2030, almost in half, 45%, so as that we can go back to the goal of achieving by the end of the century an increase of only 1.5 degrees centigrade. And we are already 1.2. Okay? So in the right chart shows us the current tendency. And this relates to achieving 4.1 to almost 5 degrees centigrade increase. And this will be terrible, terrible. For every centigrade degree, we have 7% increase in water content in the clouds. Okay? So if we implement the current policies strictly, we still will be close to 4 degrees centigrade. If we comply with the pledges, and last year there were many pledges, but the Climate Framework Convention doesn't have operational mechanisms to monitor the compliance. And still we have a huge debt from developed countries, which have been the main cause of the problem. We are all part of the problem, but they have put a higher responsibility, and they have not been close to comply with their commitments. So we need to really put the brakes on CO2 emissions from now until 2030. Plus, we have targets agreed on COP26 in Glasgow to achieve zero deforestation by 2030 and to restore 10% of our forests by 2030, only seven years from now. And what are the greenhouse gases? This is important information. This is from EPA. CO2 lasts for 1,000 years. Methane has a short life, 12. But it has the impact on average of 30% bigger than CO2 impact. And in fact, only last month, and you will see the slide quite soon, NOAA shared with the world the information that in the last years, the main cause of global warming, the main cause of greenhouse gases has been methane. And because of the melting of the permafrost, this is really worrisome. So, but nitrous oxide is another one. It lasts for 121 years, but it has the impact of close to 300 times each ton of CO2. And then we have the fluorinated gases that they last for short time, some of them, but all the way up to thousands of years. And the impact varies and it goes all the way up to 23,500 times 1 ton of CO2. So this is important. In order to reduce the impact, we should zero in into this information and identify where are we releasing methane. And in fact, I believe that here we have an opportunity where many municipalities that have not had budgets to have proper wastewater treatment, now I'm quite sure that the climate funds will open a window to finance or co-finance at least wastewater treatment systems that capture methane for energy, because it will block them from going all the way to the atmosphere and aggravating the situation. Let me share with you some tools that you can use on how to plan ahead for this changing weather and climate conditions. Climate Central is an excellent page, and it has many tools. This tool is in English and Spanish, and allows you to simulate what areas of your country is covered all over the world may be flooded with different increases of water level, 5 meters, 6 meters higher. There are different maps, different systems. There is another one for simulating the impact of the melting of the ice caps. You can do it just for the Antarctica or for the Greenland. You can see this scenario goes up to 30 meters on the increase of water sea level. Maybe high, but considering what happened last month, may not be too high. Let's hope the current estimate, which is quite conservative, of 5 meters remains, but it's not real, it's not realistic. So this is the news that I was sharing with you. This was in February this year, and the opportunity that creates for municipal projects co-financing. And now I'm moving here a little bit in one example of how does wastewater become energy. And not only produces energy, this kind of system, but also it generates a digestate, which is a soil enrichment, soil enhancement material. So this is achieved through thermal hydrolysis. And we need to move into giving priority to these systems because it's affecting health, but also is worsening the climate. And it's really bad for tourism as well. So what other efforts have been carried out that we need to check and follow up? The Club of Rome, they were visionaries in 1968, starting to meet to discuss the possible impact of the good growth, the robust growth that we had in the 70s. And they were able to commission a study by the Institute of Technology of Massachusetts. But unfortunately, the science data at that time was not as reliable as today. That has improved significantly. And they issued the limits to growth, and some of the projections were heavily criticized as being not realistic. Nonetheless, now what we see in the planet, we see that the approach was right and that we need to maintain this watchful eye on these impacts in order to adjust and change our growth patterns and actually to break this fever with accelerating growth at all costs and using a wrong and outdated indicator of a country's well-being or a region's well-being or a planetary well-being. GDP is totally outdated. It was invented by Samuel Kuznets in 1937, and it's not a reliable well-being estimate for nowadays. But I'm happy to report that the UN General Assembly approved a new methodology for estimating the value of natural capital as a first step towards moving into integrating this methodology into GDP for a more reliable and realistic indicator, which should at the same time create the conditions for a shift into the budgeting so as to give priority to this natural capital. It is quite worrisome that according to the UN, we have destroyed 40% of our natural capital, the capacity of regeneration of services, 40% in the last 20 years. There is another study by the British government that has another time estimate, 30 years. But if we're talking about 2030, having destroyed 40% of our natural capital is a severe crime. And that's why sustainable development is not a good enough option. Because quite often, for a company, it means that you are doing bad here and offsetting with this. But if everybody does this, and we have a growing population, how are we going to have sufficient food, sufficient medicines, air? We need urgently not only to restore forests, but we need to regenerate our natural capital. So it's very important to be aware of these efforts. What other tools do we have? We have the tool of the Stockholm Resilience Center. This started by Johan Rockström in 2009 and 28 scientists. Of course, there are different methodologies, but some of them include too many variables. They try to focus on the most important ones, the flagship indicators. And then you see them. And you see how we are. When you see the green clouds, it means that we are within the boundaries of the capacities of the planet without destroying the natural capital. And that is where you see the freshwater use not being a problem. But because we are misusing the water resource, it doesn't reach the people. You see the yellow light, it means that we are in a zone where there is a risk and uncertainty, In the red light, the red color, it means that we are with high risk and with a really high uncertainty. So the goal here is to reduce those red and yellow lights as much as possible, make them all green, or at least try to prevent some of the green to become yellow or the yellow to become red. So it's a very interesting measurement. And nowadays you can even see a movie on Netflix. Here's the link in this slide. This was, you see here that they didn't have indicators for novel entities, and they didn't have indicators for for this part of biosphere integrity. Now there has been an update of the measurements, and we have a new estimate for novel entities, and the main explanation for this is plastics. So, but you see, you're starting to see more red colors. So it shows the disruption and the limits that we have that we need to restore to some degree. This is the movie in Netflix. Another instrument which is very important to monitor is the one prepared by the Global Footprint Network, which has been measuring since 1970. And this is, in 1970, we were still consuming natural resources in a quantity that was not disruptive because our natural capital could generate or regenerate this destruction every year. Nowadays, all of this red color, it means a deficit. So you can see how this has increased. We have a little break in 2020 because of the pandemic, and we missed the opportunity. We're still under the pandemic, so the lessons we need to learn is to change course. Otherwise, this red is going to increase, and it's going to be a lot of loss of lives and a lot of affection into the well-being, into the economy all over the world. Many organizations have joined the Global Footprint Network into the overdrafts. And this chart is interesting because it showcases another measurement that each country should carry out. This shows, if we're looking at 1 year calendar, when each country has already eaten its natural capital that he can use or the country can use within a year, because it's going to be regenerated naturally. So you see, Qatar achieves this overshoot on February 10 and Luxembourg February 14. This is good because this is exposing countries on their real impact, and they need to be motivated and pressed to change this high impact into the natural capital. And you see many of our countries, like El Salvador, at least we're still with an overdraft, but the overdraft date is October 12th. And you can see different countries there. I don't think there are all the countries of the world. I think we need to include Caribbean countries here as well. But it's an interesting instrument to look for and to include this at the public sector decision making, but also in the towards this has to be owned by the civil society and academia to warn politicians on how to shift into responsible public policy decisions. There, the same global footprint network allows you to do these maps or these charts on the ecological footprint compared with the biocapacity, and then we have the deficit. This is the situation in the world. They need to update this info. At the moment, it reaches all the way up to 2018. But if we both join forces, Caribbean countries and Central American, Mesoamerican countries and other countries, I think they can do it as well. This Global Footprint Network has another tool, which is a country analysis, which is quite useful as well, because this is not just qualitative, emotional picture. This is based on real data. So we can see how we are abusing and destroying the bank account of our natural capital. Guatemala is in red, but El Salvador, because of our high population density, is the country in Central America with the highest deficit. And this should be monitored countrywide, citywide, department-wide. Honduras is a country with a huge natural capital, but is reaching the point of being in deficit. Not yet, but probably you see the lines, the tendencies, the trends. Probably right now they're already in a deficit. Costa Rica, which is portrayed as the green country, it has many achievements, like a 70% forest coverage, but the patterns of consumption and production still need some adjustment. What about the Caribbean? Well, I picked on Jamaica. I didn't know what the outcome was going to be, but you can go to this site that appears here and do it for your own country as well. And this will provide you an interesting tool to illuminate public decisions. Because of all of this, the UN Secretary General started in 2020, December, sharing the message. And this is not because he's an environmentalist. This is because he has seen the data, the hard data. And he concluded that mankind has been waging a suicidal war with nature, and that we need to make peace with nature, and that the current war that we are affecting nature, it will not allow us as a global system to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. Because everything is interconnected. It's not just the environment in one department and social issues in another one, or the economic growth. They are all interlinked, or the cultural capital, which is very important in these moments, because we have many highly valuable ancestral knowledge that we can use in the current crisis. So this first call of a mankind war on nature was followed up in 2021 by the launch of this synthesis document, Making Peace with Nature, that has many interesting recommendations for different sectors. And then you see the words of the Secretary General. And this is the first realization that the climate emergency is linked with the biodiversity. In fact, we already have had more than the extinction of more than 1 million species in the world, and a decline of more than 60% to 70, close to 70% decline in the Americas on the bird species. So it's a significant, this is why many scientists are calling this as the sixth extinction. So these are the 5 main messages: that environmental changes are undermining the hard-earned development gains. The Millennium Development Goals are at risk. The Sustainable Development Goals as well. The well-being of today's youth and the future of future generations. I feel young at heart at 67, but I'm thinking about my family, my son, my daughter, as you probably are as well. So we need to adjust, but the next 10 years are crucial. And you see some coincidence of these 10 years with the decade of restoration and with the green decade that I will share with you in a few minutes. So our Earth's environmental emergencies and human well-being must be addressed together. They are not separated. We need to adopt a systemic view. All the experts nowadays, we need, of course, specialists, but all the specialists, like a specialist on integrated water management or wastewater, they need today to widen their knowledge into these systemic and planetary challenges, which they also bring opportunities. Okay? The economic, financial, and productive systems are at risk. All the insurance companies are worried because the percentage of occurring fatalities are increasing. So they will need to increase the prices of their services, and they will have a tougher time selling their insurance. So we need to combine nowadays an intergenerational effort. The youth, they have a special ability with the digital world. We need this speed in developing solutions for monitoring, even artificial intelligence, or using the information available from NASA, from the European Space Agency. The European Space Agency, they have the Copernicus program open in Panama. NASA is going to open one for Central America. They have Servir for several African countries. And we need this kind of help to plan ahead and diminish damage. So the report identifies the changes needed to close the gap between the current actions and the needed to achieve real sustainable development. And we have a summary here in this poster, what the difference is, what we need to achieve, the importance of monitoring the Earth's capacities in moving from the left to the right into a viable planet. Then we had the reaction from the UN Secretary General when the IPCC report was released last year in August, just before the 26th COP on climate. And the scientists, for the first time, called the situation in the planet a code red. And code red means a global emergency. And this implies the need for actions, for change. And then the scientists also emphasize the need to go back to the 1.5 centigrades target for the end of the century and the achievements of the 45% reduction of emissions. So this relates to the solution because this is where we are today. The Earth, you see it here, is moving to this slope, and is the slope is becoming steeper. So the Earth is likely to fall very fast into a hothouse Earth, where the temperature will not allow many species to survive, including mankind. So the challenge is, how do we put the brakes on CO2, move into a systemic approach of well-being, and are able to take the Earth out of this scenario into a stabilized Earth. And the way to do it is to moving towards a new paradigm, regenerative development. If we're going to have more people in the planet, they will need to feed themselves. They will need more water, services. We cannot continue to misuse our natural capital. And the regeneration has to be applied to economics so that there is well-being, but with nature-based solutions. So there is the WWF 2020 report, and there we have the information that of the 68% decrease in population sizes of mammals, birds, amphibians, reptiles, and fish in the last 40 years. 68%. That's why the scientists are talking about the sixth extinction of species. So nature needs to be valued and needs to be managed in a smart way. We should resort to urban mining. So there are many resources that are non-renewable, like metals, and there is a huge opportunity for setting up circular economy productive centers that capture the materials from used phones, used computers, and in the same place, transform them into raw materials and use the raw materials to produce new electronics, reducing the carbon emissions, because taking the metals from mines require more energy, and reducing the reduction, the affection of the natural capital, because no more metals, those metals that have been obtained from recycling will not need to be extracted from the earth. So we need to go back and understand how nature works. In nature, in ecosystems, there is no waste. Everything is used, and it keeps its balance. So we need to act more like nature, like part of nature, understanding that this is the more stable system, is less prone to mistake, and is the one that is more reliable for a growing population in our planet. So how do we move into regenerative development? We have 4 key principles. We need to design the products so that they do not generate waste. They do not generate pollution. They are designed to be reutilized or recycled. We need to keep products and materials in use. You know, that fashion of here we have the iPhone or the Galaxy wonderful smartphone, and then there is another one in 6 months, and we just feel the urge to buy it. And sometimes this urge is being fed with even neuromarketing. We need to use neuromarketing on the other way around, to value more nature and to follow these key principles. We need to design for inclusiveness and diversity so that the products and the services are not just to one segment of the society, but to all of the society. We need to regenerate natural systems. And a good unit of analysis is the watershed. So here you see in this chart how we need to move from a system that is a degenerating system into a system that is a regenerating system. And we need to become convinced and committed with this kind of vision and where we need and why it's important to move away from these other corners and going to the upper right corner. Here we have one example of private sector organizing and adopting regenerative development. Is the GDS movement, which is the global destination stewardship movement, and they are relying on these institutions that are already providing good analysis, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. And again, we are using the biomimicry to learn from nature how they do it and replicate when it's applicable into our economy and our world. The cradle to cradle, in order not to generate waste. The regenerative leadership and principles of from a regenerative economy. Also, we have the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. They have a vision, 2050, aimed at transforming the current system. First, trying to offset the footprint, but then shifting into regeneration. I will advise that the fastest we move from offsetting into regeneration, the better. Because we will be more innovative, our system will change faster, and there will be more possibility, more feasibility of servicing a higher population in the coming years and decades. So the Sustainable Development Goals can be a transition between a degenerative development into a regenerative development. One private company, Accenture, did a study, and they estimated that moving towards regenerative development, tapping into circular economy, could unlock 4.5 trillion in growth. Cambridge Economics as well, just looking at the European Union economy, that has the potential to create 700,000 new jobs and 1.8 billion by 2030. So we need to connect this paradigm shift into positive economic outcomes to facilitate the adoption by public officials. Otherwise, they are too much used to numbers. Well, now we have numbers they can rely on. So in ecosystemic approach, pollution, greed, unemployment, waste, inequalities, and poverty are human inventions. Those they can and should be designed out of our next model of life. So this is the challenge, is a major transformation, and combined with integrated watershed management, this is a must. In many countries, we all know that this is the ideal, but there are very few watersheds that are being managed. In the population that lives in cities, they don't care about the upper watershed, whereas we should and we can set up a system of payment for ecosystem services, where the people that live here provide services to the lower basin. Okay, there is plenty of information available. The steps that are important: get to know the watershed, move from the abstract concept into the reality, identify local issues, develop the plans, implement the actions, monitor, report, and again, go back to the loop. Also, the Swedish have come up with a new, more holistic approach to integrated watershed management. And this is very good because it covers one area that we have not been covering, which is the sea. So it's looking at the watershed from the source of the water all the way down to the ocean, to the sea. Of course, it's more complex, but it is the more responsible thing to do. And this implies looking at the flows, and they are categorized in 6 key flows, and to monitor them. And this is trying to move away from particular interests, because quite often where some watershed efforts are being carried out, they focus only maybe on electricity generation. Like in El Salvador, there is no watershed authority for the Lempa River, and the watershed covers half of the country, and is the largest in Central America. But we do have 5 dams in the river. So our view is narrow into energy generation. What about the rest? The agriculture, the water for the population. Now we even have a mine 9 kilometers from the border of El Salvador that is going to shift from tunnel exploitation of gold and silver into an open pit operation that is planning to operate for 15 years. And it's risking the contamination of Lake Ouija, which feeds into the Lempa River. So we need to change these concepts in tapping into the new available instruments that I'm sharing with you today. And this is not rocket science. I will leave this for you to review it carefully, but we need to go to characterization, engagement with locals, a good diagnostics, not only on the assets, natural, entrepreneurial, cultural assets, but also the governance system. This is essential so that people are not disengaged because they got the impression that this is only supporting particular interests and not affecting their well-being. The design is essential, the theory of change and the intervention strategies, the action. And this requires funding. So funding should be secure in implementation capacity. And then adapt, monitor and adapt. So in order to build a closed loop. And this is important. The reason I mentioned one, to contribute to the main natural capital that we have on the earth, which is the ocean. If the ocean collapses, everything collapses. Okay. So the integrated water management requires this watershed-based approach informed by science to manage natural resources and human activities together. This is not just for preservation, but is integrating the human factor, but making the humans to act more like nature acts. Okay? And we need to have an adaptive management and an excellent high-level governance. So these are the tools, the roles of a conservation authority and the tools for integrated with water management. So information and lessons to develop a map, a roadmap already exists. We just need to put some time and resources and talk to people and convince them that this is worthwhile and that may be a smart use of the different capitals they have in the watershed. So how we came up with the Green Decade? In 2020, we had this information, the COVID-19. We reviewed it and we saw it from the beginning that this was related to the footprint of mankind, the abuse of natural capital. Because COVID-19, like SARS, H1N1, and is a zoonotic disease. And according to a UN report in 2020, there are up to 850,000 additional viruses that could be caught by humans unless we protect nature. And you see the different linkages there. The resources of our planet are being exploited in oceans and land beyond the natural capacity, the species extinction. So we saw all of this. In 2020, I believe the biggest wetland in the world started to caught fire in Brazil. So the dry corridor expanded in Central America. The pollution in cities, the solid waste problem continued and aggravated. So doing a deep analysis, we came up with the need for a 10-year strategy as Salvanatura, not only internally, but as a service to Mesoamerica. But we are seeing the value with a humble consideration. And we believe that this may be of interest for the Caribbean countries. So we are shifting, we are adopting the regeneration as the new paradigm. So our mission, our declared mission in 2020 was to facilitate the implementation of regenerative and sustainable development in Mesoamerica to save the natural resources of our sub-region. In our vision, where we want to arrive, to achieve, is a Mesoamerica in peace and in harmony with nature, which recognizes the positive contribution of natural resources in favor of social and economic well-being, and recovers its viability. In fact, Mesoamerica is considered one of the 6 more biodiversity-rich regions in the world, but we are likely to lose that. So we chose as strategic objectives integrated watershed management from source to the ocean with a landscape and systemic approach, including all activities being carried out in the watershed and their interactions, educations based in science, innovation, and ancestral knowledge for regenerative development, to support empowerment and capacity building of territorial leaders, knowledgeable of their priorities. In fact, Salvanatura decided to become a second floor NGO. We still may implement directly some projects, but the main effort will be to strengthen the capacities of local actors in the territories. So we have access to knowledge. We have an international network. We can bring this knowledge to all the stakeholders on the ground to disseminate this knowledge so that they can upscale quite fast their capacities for action. And using the digital technology, unfortunately, we had proved for the first time in 33 years, in 32 years at that time, a part of the national budget, but then for other complications, it was not available. So we have not been able to put together a friendly digital platform for all of the sectors of El Salvador that can be expanded for the other Mesoamerican countries, and could be, if you believe this is of value to you in the Caribbean, this could be replicated and enriched with your expertise. Now that I know you have something that we do not have. You have the agreed program in the Caribbean for the small island states in a development with zero or low use of chemicals. And we can learn from that. We can exchange information with our initiative to restore the Mesoamerican biological corridor, because that's the solution against the dry corridor, the Mesoamerican biological corridor. So this is, in short, the Green Decade. It tries to be simple. Our first action was in Lake Ouija. We found a partner, the Rotary clubs. You may know that Rotary International has adopted environment as one new, I think it's its 7th area of work. And we started pro bono 2.5 years ago, and we are making a difference. We have caught the attention of different ministries, all the municipalities. Despite the challenge of the Cerro Blanco mine that I mentioned before, we continue to work. And now we are connecting the Lake Ouija, which is a Ramsar site, connecting it with the higher part of the Trifinio, because Ouija is part of the Trifinio. It's a special area where the 3 countries, Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, unite. And there is a new project coming up, different projects, one from the GEF on integrated watershed management. And we want to help by demonstrating that this can be successful. It's not easy. There are different complexities, but we are doing it. And I am now I engage myself personally as a member of the Ramsar Lake Ouija Complex Committee. And we have obtained funding to develop a management plan for the Lake Ouija site. And we are looking at the British government Ministry of Environment global program on biodiverse landscapes. And we tap into, you may have some lakes in some of your countries. This institution is the top in the world with 35 years experience on integrated lake basin management. So I'm sharing with you this information as well. We are very interested in exchanging information with other similar initiatives. We are partnering with the University of Guanajuato in Mexico. We are about to sign a framework agreement of cooperation. And this is the material from the ILEC. This is just a 2-pager for you to review it. This is a long-term effort But you can, if you follow this guideline, you will be on a sound basis to a successful effort. And they put a lot of, they put a lot of importance into the governance. So the soil is the geographic location, and the roof is the governance. And you see different pillars there, knowledge and information, technologies, participation, policies, and institutions. All of the institutions that have impact in the watershed need to be part of it, and all of the different stakeholders as well. So we're going to move into the wastewater management. I do have some very short time, close to 10 minutes. So adequate wastewater management can improve the availability of clean water in a world, I mentioned already this, we have 40% water scarcity, and where water will be increasingly less available. I also share this because of a larger population, a bigger urbanization rate, and higher evaporation due to global warming. This helps to capture methane, and there is an opportunity there, I mentioned this. Also, it helps to reduce the early mortality rate, which is affecting 3 million inhabitants annually that die because of contaminated water. And more seriously, it's affecting children below 5 years of age. There are many opportunities for preventing the generation of wastewater, which is more in tune with a regenerative development approach. Example, the environmental sound management of recycling of used lead acid batteries, avoiding the throwing of the used electrolyte to rivers or creeks, and this contains lead and diluted sulfuric acid. There are big opportunities to make a better use of rainfall for non-drinkable use by humans, or even for drinkable use by humans with an economic filter like eco-filter, which could be used by families made of natural ingredients. This filter lasts for 2 years and it eliminates the need for single-use plastic bottles. If you visit Antigua, not Antigua the island, but Antigua in Guatemala, which is nearby the factory of EcoFilter, you'll see that all of the hotels and restaurants, none of them sell bottled water. They all give you the free water using EcoFilter. Also, we need to put attention into the depletion of water aquifers that can be reduced. It will make serious effort to comply with the climate COP26 commitment of stopping reforestation, because the forest coverage, of course, retains the moisture and facilitates the feeding into water aquifers. To update the old, partly broken urban and community water systems, I mentioned this, where there is 50% water leakage. There are less costly technologies available for treating wastewaters, like bioremediation or for soil erosion control, which are not costly and have the advantage of increasing the climate resiliency, and also provide opportunities for income generation because of increased availability of water for gas irrigation or even biogas for cooking, which is the top notch for avoiding methane emissions. There are opportunities to educate people from cities about the dependency from people that live in the higher parts. And this chart shows the higher part people providing services to the lower part, higher water, quality of water, and the city dwellers providing a payment for their services. There is the opportunity, colleagues from the Caribbean, to participate in something new that Salvanatura is putting together, We already announced on TV last Monday that we will dare to organize by November the first edition of Regenerative, a physical and virtual fair on regenerative products and services, which will include options for pollution prevention, like Industry 5.0, or for less costly wastewater treatment. We are willing to organize it in Central America, 1 year in one country, the following year in another country. We suggest, if you like this idea, that we could assist you in replicating Regenera into the Caribbean, combining this into 2 countries. And also we propose that the 2 efforts from the Caribbean and Mesoamerica could be merged into one single virtual fair that we foresee that we will also have a virtual market of high quality and cost-effective goods and services that are sustainable or regenerative. There is an opportunity also for setting up exchange experiences between participants in this CReW Academy. We have similarities. We are, in general, we are small countries. In the Isthmus, we are very close to the ocean. We are closer to being islands. Of course, you are different and you have a higher risk, and we acknowledge that. But we could exchange experiences and work in unison and have a higher impact in markets, in innovation, and also in positioning our vulnerable, highly vulnerable countries in international meetings. So in this, which I already mentioned, the opportunity to learn from you on this innovation program. Also, we have the opportunity for capturing up-to-date satellite information and enrich our planning at the watershed level, the planning for the cities. Now there is even a time-lapse option in Google where we can see the evolution of the changing of the use of land and sort of use it as a basis for forecasting the future that is ahead. So thank you very much. Any questions or comments you may have, I will welcome very much. And apologies for the extensive presentation, but I hope it has been useful for you. Thank you. Let me quit my share screen. And I pass the floor to Maria Paula.
Thank you, Mr. Araujo. We have a few questions in the chat, so I'm going to read it to you. The first question is, what is the reason why public officials, when they have the state power, fail to implement real solutions to mitigate the negative effects of climate change? For example, reduce the production of bottled water by large local capital or invest in high-cost rainwater capture works.
Okay, the reason I would say is because they look at the short term. They look at the next elections. And we need to empower the citizens with this information. This information is not only for the professionals or the experts, but we need to bring this information in a way that can be digested by the general public. And for the general public to demand from the politicians to be more responsible and to have a better quality planning and to put effort not only in the short term, but in the big challenges, which are also opportunities with the current crisis. I am proposing that the Caribbean, in talking about the Caribbean in a wider context, not just the Caribbean states, but Mesoamerica as well, being part of the Caribbean basin, we could promote capturing the flag of innovation and practical solutions for the current triple global emergency. If we really follow up this webinar, this academy, not only getting knowledge, information, very up-to-date information, but taking the responsibility of the window we have to make a change and to strengthen each sub-region, Caribbean and Mesoamerica, by setting up concrete activities. I'm sure that ICAP will be happy that the CReW Academy is not only providing personal, individual, professional enrichment, but is helping to make a difference in the current triple emergency where we have no time but to act and make the best for good economic value, environmental and social improvement.
Thank you for your answer. We have another question from Gabriela. How to convince people about the need for real wastewater treatment and reuse and guarantee environmental protection when basic needs, water, food, health, are not covered?
Okay, I think this Regenera fair needs to have two angles of communication. It has to be an angle for government officials, for businessmen, for mayors, but it has to have an angle for the general public in very easy to understand language, combining recreation. For example, I saw something in Nicaragua after Mitch. Well, the Hopkins University supported the Blue Bus, which visited different communities with entertainment. And through entertainment, it provided messages. So we need to be smart into how to engage with the average citizen, because they have the power, the numbers to change, to be able to influence everybody. And we need to provide to them concrete, small actions that they can take that may help us in the big objectives that we have. So we need to think in different audiences and have different values for these audiences to make a difference in a short term, in a short time that we have. Marketing, communication, and entertainment.
Thank you, Mr. Araujo. I think we don't have any other question. So thank you very much, Miguel, for your presentation. We have reached the end of the synchronous session of the module 2. We remind you to review the virtual campus where you will find the evaluative activities, today presentation, as well as the recording of this session and bibliographic materials to deepen the subject. Also, your opinion is very important to us, so we thank you for sharing your feedback on this module through a survey that will be sent at the end of the week. The information collected in the survey will allow us to develop a continuous improvement of the modules. It has been an honor for us to facilitate this space. I would like to thank you on behalf of the German Agency for International Cooperation and ICAP for your valuable participation. So you can disconnect now.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.